Hello, welcome. My name is Leanne Etzold. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of the Wilma Theater's Portable Studio program with Rachel O'Hanlon Rodriguez. I have fair skin and freckles with short brown hair. I'm wearing black rimmed glasses, a black shirt, and a brown sweater. I live in Lenape-Hocking, also known as the Philadelphia area, which is also where the Wilma Theater is located. This is land that is not ours. We acknowledge that the Lenni Lenape people are the original people of this land and that they continue to be a vibrant community. We acknowledge that we benefit from systems that are rooted in capital, created and expanded by the free labor of Black people in the form of chattel slavery and legal and cultural segregation. My coworker, Rachel, wrote, "We stand on the shoulders of so many who have come before us." I wanted to acknowledge that this evening. Thank you. And thank you, Rachel. Rachel is here supporting this discussion off screen in the chat. Anyone in the Zoom audience is invited to leave questions or thoughts there, and we will make time at the end of this discussion to address as many as we can. Also, please use the chat to let us know where you are from. Give a land acknowledgement if you can as well. Our Asl Interpreters here are provided by Hands Out Productions, and there is the Zoom closed caption button if you would like to use it at the bottom right hand of your screen. We will be recording this event this evening, and we will also be putting more accurate captions if necessary in the recorded version. That will be available on the Wilma's website. I want to thank Jessie Betts, who is helping out with this event as well from behind the scenes, and Alexandra Espinoza for their research and help as we wrap our minds around this question. What is lost in translation and found in performance? This particular question was inspired by our production of Minor Character, 6 translations of Uncle Vanya at the same time. Please know that it's not necessary to have seen Minor Character to be in conversation with us this evening. We do hope you get a chance to see the show though. This question about how and why we use translation was also inspired by conversations I have had with some of our guests tonight. I'd like to welcome our roundtable participants to the Zoom room. If you can turn on your screens. And as they join us, I should share that this particular discussion is really only one part of a larger conversation that I hope will continue. I'm really looking forward to have these folks in conversation with us and with each other. Hello, welcome. Would you all please introduce yourselves? Please share a visual description of yourself and anything else you think we should know. And if you'd like to, you can also share what you love about the art of translation. I always like to start with love. And then after these brief introductions, we'll dive in. Tana, would you please start us off? Thank you.
Of course. Hello, everyone. So great to be here. My name is Tana Márquez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a bilingual theater artist and the Associate Artistic Director of Teatro del Sol. I am a Latina. I have white skin. I have dark hair tied back in a ponytail, and I'm wearing a blue sweater with white and green patterns and shapes. I am coming to you from the ancestral land of the Lenni Lenape. And I'll pass the mic over to Tailinh.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Wilma Theater for having me here today. My name is Tailinh Agoyo, and I'm the director of We Are the Seeds, which is an Indigenous art and culture organization here in Philadelphia. I am of Native, Narragansett, and Chinese ancestry. I have long black hair. I'm wearing some beaded earrings that are very fabulous and very long, and they give me strength, and a black shirt. And what I love about translation, Was that the question? Sort of?
Sure, if you want to, I love it.
Oh, okay, yeah, that it gives an opportunity for us to share our work with a wide range of audiences. And I will pass the mic to Donna Ellis.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Donna Ellis. I am a co-founder of Hands Up Productions. We provide ASL interpreting services to the arts community in the greater Philadelphia area. I am a white woman with red curly hair and black glasses. I'm wearing a black shirt and I'm sitting in front of a gray background. As to the question about what was it something we love about the art of translation? I think what I love about the art of translation is how it allows me to broaden my understanding and appreciation of both languages and cultures in the process. Okay, and now I'm passing the mic to Milo.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Milo. I also want to thank the Wilma for having us. It's so cool to be here. I use he, him pronouns. I am on the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay people in San Diego, California. I have pale skin and short brown hair. I'm wearing a tan sweater, and I am a playwright, and I am a co-founder of New Saloon Theater Company and one of the original core devisers of Minor Character, 6 translations of Uncle Vanya at the same time. I only speak English because I have been coddled by hegemonic American culture. And it's, you know, a tragedy. So I'm very grateful for translation. And I am passing the mic to Yury.
Hi, thank you, Milo, and thank you for the play, really. It was such a pleasure to work on that. I'm Yury Urnov. I use he, him pronouns. I am the artistic director of the Wilma Theater and the director of the production of the Minor Character at the Wilma Theater. I'm a white guy with mustache and a bit of a beard. I'm balding pretty fast for a pity. And I'm also a bilingual artist. I'm Russian natively, and we with my wife who moved here the United States about 10 years ago.
Thank you all so much. I am so grateful for you all to be in this room together, and I appreciate your patience as we go through all of these logistics and introductions, and now I am very anxious to start to dive into the question. I imagine we're going to get at it from different angles, but I wanted to start with your experience with translation. How does translation most often show up in your work? And I'm happy to start with whoever's most inspired. No pressure.
I'm happy to start.
Thanks, Donna.
Translation is literally our work. We literally start from a text in English, typically when we're working in the theater setting, and we have to translate it into an accessible text in ASL. So how it shows up in our work is the literal process of moving from what is a linear spoken language into what is a visual language. Mm-hmm. Our process is that we work in teams. Generally, there are 2 or 3 interpreters on a team, and a DAZL, which is referred to as a director of American Sign Language, sometimes referred to as a director of artistic sign language. Generally, that's the deaf person on our team. And we work with that text probably for 6 to 8 weeks before interpreting it. We break it down from English. I call it looking for trouble, which means we're looking for puns and nonsense language, anything that isn't English, music, pacing issues, basically anything that's funny, anything that speaks to a hearing audience and will need to be interpreted, not just language-wise, but for all of those other modes so that a deaf audience can have an on-par experience. That's the beginning of the process. But So it shows up in my work in a very literal sense.
Thank you.
In all sorts of ways, really. I think translation work, being a freelance artist, sometimes it shows up when someone says, hey, can you translate this piece of text for me? I do a lot of work with oral histories. And so I've translated work that's been narrated in Spanish into English and work that's been narrated in English into Spanish. And then in my own personal work, where sometimes that's with other collaborators and we're trying to find the truth in storytelling. And that could be through text. It's also, I've had many times in the room where I've been directing an all Spanish speaking cast and our stage manager doesn't speak Spanish. So it's simultaneously translating in real time to make sure everything's very clear and there's an open communication with everyone in the room.
Thank you.
I can speak about the process of making minor character, which is the only time I've really worked with or in translation in a meaningful way. And we loved Uncle Vanya was what was going on. And we loved Chekhov more broadly, actually. But it was so, I mean, it felt very foreign to us. We didn't understand the naming system. It's also 100 years in the past. We didn't understand the family structure or the social norms, you know, and also we were young. We were in our early 20s at the time. And so it became, the process on the project became about what's the most beautiful thing we can do given who we are with this text. Which included, at times, I have a spreadsheet which has six, I think more than 6 actually, translations of Uncle Vanya next to each other in columns. And we would go through them, you know, and try to figure out what's happening in every moment and think, you know, which part is the most funny, which part is the most beautiful, how would I say that? And so that was a very rigorous process, something I've never done before or since.
Thank you.
Amazing. It was really impressive. And I'm happy to hear some of that process. I think it's, with our organization, we work with a lot of different Indigenous artists, and sometimes it's through fine art, sometimes it's through performance. I think it's an interesting way to think about translation when I was posed this question, because to us, English is a foreign language. And English was forced upon our ancestors in sometimes very cruel and horrific ways. But we all use it now. And some of us have lost our languages. Some of us are reclaiming them. Some of us still have them and are very fluent in our languages. But when I work with Indigenous artists, you know, there are over 700 native federally recognized tribes in the United States. And there's also state recognized tribes. And then there are tribes that have not yet gained recognition from the federal government yet. But as you can tell in the numbers, we are vast and we are varied and we are diverse. So there are all of these languages that either exist or have existed. So when we work with Indigenous artists, a lot of times they come to us with some knowledge of their language and incorporate it into their performance and share it with the audiences, all the while speaking English too. So it's this combination. But I think it's interesting when you talk to fluent native language speakers, they talk about how the English is so different, how native, and now this is not all, I'm not speaking for everybody, but how some native languages really talk about the land and describe the land and what it does, what the plants offer as medicines, and just very, very different than the English language. And there's not really a comparable side-by-side comparison. So it's really interesting to explore all of that and try to find some kind of way to navigate interpreting all of it with an audience, and to try to make sure audiences can understand where we're coming from when we're speaking English or singing in our own languages.
Thank you for that. Yury, you've done quite a bit of translating, apart from minor character, true?
Yeah, I've been translating mostly into Russian. I've been doing Edward Albee, Sarah Rule, McDonough, and then directing this piece sort of mostly for myself because I wanted to direct them in Russian. And then we translated a full series of contemporary Russian plays into English. That was about 10 years ago, and it was like a big movement back there. So I really like this work. I can't really be like fully responsible for translating into English. I need I need an editor for that, but back to Russian I did it on my own. But I love this work because it makes you look at the same thing from at least 2 or more perspectives already. And I also like to think about that the idea of languages goes beyond the idea of verbal language. I think there is, at least in the theater, right, you can already find the idea of language of color, language of light, language of theater performance and theater performance in different genres. And all of these are languages. And I'm also stunned by the idea that knowing the language doesn't guarantee you being comfortable in the culture, that the culture and the habits and the everyday life and the norms is another language. And which is actually, for me as an immigrant, was much harder to learn. I'm still learning it than to learn the verbal English speaking language itself.
I thank you all for that context. It's so vast, all of the ways we use translation. And I'm also hearing, though, this quest for truth, and this, like, I'm hearing people use the word beauty, looking for beauty, and a sort of reclamation, or perhaps a connection through interpretation. And I'm just curious, in your experiences, where you feel like the challenges have been. Where has translation, I hate to use the word failed, but not maybe betrayed those quests, or didn't actually serve those quests, where you did have to perhaps look to something beyond language for meaning?
Well, I don't know if I'd say the word failed. I feel like translation really fails when you put everything into Google Translate, and then it's not going to give you what you need. But I think from a Spanish-speaking perspective, there's so many, and I'm sure any country or many countries that speak the same language, there's so many different sayings and colloquialisms and slang. And so I think that it's just a bigger question in terms of when you want something translated from English into Spanish, okay, but what Spanish? Who is coming to see this show? Who is this for? Is this for a Mexican audience? Is this for a Puerto Rican audience? Is this for a Spanish audience, Cuban audience? Because all different meanings of words are going to have, different meanings. And there's so many great like TikTok videos and Instagram videos of people from different Spanish speaking countries translating or speaking about their experiences of going into another Spanish speaking country. For example, there are these 2 Mexican comedians who talk about going to Colombia for the first time and how they just were so baffled by some of the words, where I can say them now. I don't know if anyone will understand, but like, for example, a pharmacy In Mexico, you say farmacia, but in Colombia, you say drogaria, like a drugstore, and how there was like a confusion there. Another funny one was how this person had a fever, and they were saying, I feel very hot, which is calentura, but in Colombia, that means a different kind of hot. And so when they were trying to get this medicine, there's a lot of confusion there. So I think it's just opening the question of who is this translation for? Why are we translating these pieces? And of course, we always want to be all-inclusive, without a doubt, but it's just, I think that it's important to be sometimes specific in who these pieces are for. And I forgot to answer the original question of like why I love translation, so I'll just say it now. But I love translation work because it opens curiosity and it allows for these conversations to happen. And I truly think translation work is not a one-person job. It's many people having this conversations of what makes sense to you. But I would use it this year. So yeah, that's my big answer.
I just like a couple examples that keep coming to my head when I'm thinking about Russian, and specifically funny about Russian, because like the thing we're doing now, the community outreach, both words are really intranslatable into my language. So the motherland of communism doesn't have the idea of community at the same time, for example. And the word outreach is just like there is no verb that can do this in gesture or whatever. So and on the backside, I keep thinking of this Russian verb terpetь, which sort of means persevere or forbear, but actually is much bigger than that. Is to wait and suffer without any hope for anything changing for the better. And so yeah, so like I love the ideas that don't exist in other languages, kind of, and that end up in the words or phrases, because they actually, I think, in these two cases, they certainly are saying something about at least my native culture.
So, yes, and sometimes I hunger for new words in my language, because even in my own language, they stop meaning certain things or have been co-opted or used in ways that change what I used to use. It's such an interesting thing, your relationship to a language. And I'm curious about the idea of the artists who originate language and how beholden you might be to their original meaning in translating. And then also understanding that that's only one part that's of the trajectory. And then you also have to consider the audience that you're translating for and how you navigate that space in between. I'm curious if anyone can talk about that.
I can try. Yeah, the audience gives us a lot of information in our work, often when we're starting with the text and we run into problems, trouble, maybe puns, for example, or other languages. We'll take a look at what the audience's experience with the text is. So are they laughing? Is it funny? Is it just a pause? I'm trying to think of an example like for Lion King is a good example. So in Lion King opens with this big, beautiful song, la, 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 right? So we looked at, so what are we gonna do with that text? And there's a lot of African text in that show. Luckily, the script actually gives you the translation. But the question we ask ourselves, so how do we give a deaf audience the same experience as that hearing audience? That hearing audience hears this beautiful music, understands that it's not English, understands that it's language, knows that they can't understand it, and has an emotional response to it. So we take a look at what that hearing audience's experience is, and then from there try to figure out, does that mean that we should take the translated text and interpret it into English? Would that give a deaf audience an on-par experience? We decided, our interpreting team decided it would not. So we found a deaf artist, a Asl, a deaf coach, who was fluent in another signed language. This deaf coach knew Australian Sign Language, and he worked to translate it into Australian Sign Language, which we had to learn. And then what we produced was a language that a deaf audience would look at, see was not American Sign Language, recognize it as a language, and have an emotional response to it. So an on-par experience as a hearing audience. So we take a lot of information from a hearing audience to make decisions about the ride we want the deaf audience to take, to make sure that it's a similar ride and experience that a hearing audience can take. I'm thinking of another show where they had one character who the entire time spoke in Pig Latin. That doesn't translate well. So we brought in a deaf coach. Always, I would say, very important to bring a native user of the language. Deaf eyes bring a whole different world, a whole different perspective. You can think you're bilingual all day long, but that deaf coach hears and sees things that you will never be able to see. And so I played with 100 different ways to represent Pig Latin, signing backwards, over my shoulders. How do I flip a language? How do I flip it? How do I give them a similar experience? And it had to be funny, but it also had to be understandable. When we listen to Pig Latin, we understand what they're saying. We recognize it as inverted, and it's funny. So how do we do that? So after many iterations with my deaf coach, trying 100 things, he's asked me, Donna, what if you simply cross your hands and sign like this? So a deaf audience can understand it, but it looked inverted and it was funny. And it was just funny enough because it's not hilarious. It's just a little bit funny. And those are how we come up with answers. We try to find ways to get an on-par experience and bring in deaf native users of the language who are also experienced in arts and theater.
That's funny and so specific. Every situation has to be dealt with very specifically. That's where the artistry comes in. I'm curious about other people's relationships with the originating artists versus the audiences that are going to receive.
I don't know if this is a direct response to the question, but I'm thinking about, there's all these moments in minor character where one Sonia says she's not pretty, another Sonia says, I'm so plain, another Sonia says, I'm so attractive, and then I wrote a Sonia who says, I wish I was more sexy, and sometimes they act it, and I used to play Sonia, and there's one way to act it, which is like we're all trying to get at the missing, like, true kernel. You know what I mean? Which I feel like presents one kind of like theory of translation, or this idea that there's like a truth that you could get to, you know? But I actually think what's happening in the play more broadly, and what's kind of more fun, and is like it's just a carnival of different meanings, you know? And this happens over and over again, where there's different responses to an absent original text, which, I mean, for us when we were first making it was like very unknowable. So it was a kind of celebration of differences, rather than an attempt to like resolve them. Yeah, I don't know if that's...
No, that does help.
Yeah.
I feel for me in that moment, it really mirrored my process of word choice, and choosing words in interesting ways. I sometimes try them on in my brain first and see, and sometimes they come out of my mouth and they shouldn't have. And so that, as trying to honor my original feeling as the originator of that, and then trying to translate my own feeling into something that comes out, I feel like that is an iterative process for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also love this idea of trying to find something in translation, and Tailinh, I was wondering if you could speak more to this idea of reclamation and how performance can help with that connection from the origin of perhaps a story to a modern a modern audience.
Sure. A lot of what we do here in Philadelphia is educate audiences about the history of this land and this place and of Native peoples, and also about who we are as contemporary Native people today. And I think Yury mentioned this before, how music and dance is so important, and that's a language in and of itself. And that's what I find, we consider ourselves, we lift Indigenous artists, we celebrate Indigenous art and culture. So when we go out, we do tell some truths, right? And they're hard to hear sometimes, but we tell them in a way where we come out and we want to celebrate the beauty of our cultures. And so with each individual performer, some will sing songs that are traditional for them. A lot of times we have the drum, which is something that you can physically feel it inside your body. And then Chin actually we were at Fit Fest at Penn Treaty, what's now called Penn Treaty Park, on Saturday, and he is a master storyteller. And it was so interesting to watch him because, he tells the stories in English, but he actually uses a lot of sleight of hand and magic to tell the story, using his body and so much movement. And when I was watching him this time, it was so wonderful because there was so much movement. If you didn't understand the language that he was using, you would still understand the story. And he played the flute, and in his movements and the energy coming off of him, it was all right there. So when I love it that we get to educate people and kind of turn perspectives about who Indigenous people are, what has happened here, just change perspectives, and because there's a lot of misunderstanding, as you know, and a lot of erasure of Native people, and it's active. And so, but I love that we go in and we can bring joy, and people leave our events feeling so lifted and like they have a better understanding. And they may not be about specific dates or details or anything else, but they leave feeling like they understand and they know we're here. And so that in that way, I always feel like we've done our job. So I hope that answers your question.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you. I think there is a sort of desire for a visceral connection in this work. And physicality does, I think, help so much. I think there was something I read that perhaps was from a Pew study about unison movement being something that we really respond to. I think that happened a lot in minor character. I see that in a lot of cultural dance, culturally specific dance, and that recognition of togetherness, seeing that in front of you, something we really respond to as human beings. What are some other strategies for finding that meaning, finding that connection that other people have found in performance? I know Yury talked about design elements. Tana, I know you use a lot of music too. I'm wondering who else can speak to that.
Well, I think we actually have the theater language, right? It's the language of actions and reactions. So that's why in most articulated physically productions, or just articulated productions even psychologically, you can understand what's going on, and even if you don't understand the details, so that's, I do think there is a language right there.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think that communication goes further than language, a little bit than what Tailinh was saying in terms of the movements and the body language. Going off of translation work, a lot of the work I do is either all in Spanish or English and Spanish, and I never have subtitles. And people always ask, why don't you have subtitles? And partly because I just want people to experience the show and the story. And of course, maybe you're not getting every single word, but I think it's that connection with whoever's on stage and the audience, the tone that we set, the energy, sure, the movement, the sound. I think it's our job as storytellers on the stage to create an atmosphere and to invite people into that atmosphere. So yeah, I think in terms of other ways of translating that it's not just text, I think it's being, culturally specific in terms of the work that we do. We just did Oedipus El Rey, which is a Chicano version of Oedipus Rex. And so we said all the clothing was like very, very Chicano, Cholo clothes. The music was all Chicano music. The set, we had this beautiful mural painted by Cesar Viveros, who's a Chicano muralist in Philadelphia. So it's having that representation on stage to create that atmosphere, to translate the story that we want to tell.
Thank you, yes. I want to make a note that we have about 20 minutes left in our time together. And I want to invite the Zoom audience, if they wish, to pop some questions into the chat as we're talking. And if you do have any questions or topics you would like to bring up, maybe a specific situation, feel free to drop that in the chat and we will make our best effort to get to as much as we can. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk a little bit more about translation as advocacy and translation as I don't know if I want to say it as a bridge, but one of the things that I love about translation is that the form itself can be as beautiful as the act of connecting people. And sometimes that does mean not actually translating a thing and leaving the language as it is, as Tana was talking about. And all the different ways that you feel that might be showing up in your work as far as speaking to more than just delivering a plot. The function of a translation, making sure the audience understands the story. What else does it accomplish when there's multiple language in the room?
I don't know if I'm answering your question directly. If so, what else does it accomplish when there's multiple languages in the theater space, like bilingual work? Yes. From what I love about translation work, I think I'll say the same thing. It opens curiosity. It kind of switches the audience to tune in and really stay with the story, and to look for other things in the space if they're not catching all the words. So maybe that's in terms of body language or a gesture, and the psychology of the characters beyond words. And so I think it brings more focus and a playfulness with the audience and the people on stage.
did it crack open anything else for others? Like, what surprised you when you, Milo, can you speak to that a little bit? What surprised you when you had your spreadsheet up in front of you with all those different translations?
I think to some extent we were thinking of what we were making as something new. You know, it's not called Uncle Vanya, it's called My Character. And so there was this, but at the same time, we were, you know, trying to tell the story very earnestly. And I mean, that was this tension where on the one hand, it was like, we're following what's exciting and we're really being ourselves and being honest about that. And on the other hand, we're like, are engaging extremely earnestly and like from a place of love with this text that we don't understand that really like has nothing to do with us. And I think that that kind of tension, it became like a very wonderful animating force in the show. Yeah, we thought a lot about our, you know, breath and syllables and, you know, when actors breathe and what is fun to say, what's exciting to say. And Chekhov has all these lines where the character changes how they feel in the middle of the line. Like Vanya suddenly starts grieving his sister after having been like raucous and drunk a second before. And they're also long lines. Whereas I feel in a lot of contemporary, like kind of mainstream playwriting, like that doesn't happen. You know, playwrights write all these really short lines and like beat changes are like crystal clear. And I don't know, there's something kind of catchy and satisfying about that. But also, I think in Chekhov, partly it achieves this kind of watercolor depth, this feeling that, you know, he's so famous for. And so I don't know, that was something we played with. Like in my translation towards the end, it's very, very, very kind of like millennial, like rat-a-tat, tit-for-tat television. So I mean, this is like, I don't even know if this is like in the same conversation anymore, but it became this also, this style. There was a cultural exchange going on, you know, between Morgan and Maddie and I, and like Russia.
The other members of New Saloon. Yes, the other members of New Saloon. Mm-hmm.
I think what you guys really grasped is like, I feel like English is very much, I mean, in comparison to Russian, it's very much to the point. You're able to say what you intended to say. And in Russian, you kind of, you start finding what you want to say as you're saying stuff, right? So you're getting to the meaning or not in most cases, right? By the procedure of saying words. And I think this idea with multiple translations kind of really delivers this feel of, I feel like I have something to say. I just don't have really words for that. So it's this or this or this or that. Well, I don't know what I wanted to say, right? And then, oh, okay, better go have a drink, right?
I think having different languages or translations it's kind of a way to activate your brain, and it feels like music to me. Everything sounds different. It has a different wait, I'm not going to say it. Canter. Is that the right word? Canter. Rhythm. I think I have the wrong word. But you know, I mean, it gives you different feelings in your body, depending on where you were raised or where you come from. And on that subject that I said about English, like I've been really paying attention lately, saying that this is I do speak a bit Chinese, but this is the only language that was really given to me. And I've been having these kind of outer body experiences lately, like, oh, this isn't actually my language. This isn't my ancestral language. This is not what's running through my blood or my veins or anything. This is actually a foreign thing that's been placed on me. And it's been so interesting to have this kind of removing myself from the speech. And I've been exploring that lately. So I think this is really an appropriate conversation because I've just been going through a little personal thing about it. But it's fascinating. And I love hearing other languages, whether I know that they sound musical and they can just kind of make you feel all these different kinds of ways. And so even if I watched a lot of TV shows, that foreign language TV shows, and they have the option where you can have it in English. And I never do that. I always watch it with the subtitles, even if I'm like super tired and I'm falling asleep. It's just like, I love hearing it. And it's just not the same when it's translated.
I agree, I'm the same way. I'd rather read and hear the original inflections. And I think there's also, I love what you said about how a language feels in your body. And there's something, I've never been able to catch on to a language, or I've tried several times. And there's, I know I've talked to people who have been able to teach themselves another language. And I didn't know if any of you have learned languages as adults, but I am so English. So I worry that that's taken over my body in a weird way, that I wish there was more space for another language. I didn't know if any of you who are bilingual feel how it feels in your body. I'm just curious about that, and we'll probably have to wrap up a little bit, but I want to hear that first, just out of my curiosity.
I mean, I guess I can try to respond to that. I've been thinking about your question prior. Maybe I can connect them because our work is just a little bit different. But originally, I was thinking about just your question prior about having both languages in the room, 2 different languages in the room. Originally, I was thinking about the house side of it, about having people from an underrepresented culture suddenly in the theater with the majority culture, and how that changes things up just naturally by being there. But it also led me, and it's making me think about your more current question, thinking about the work we do, which is not often, which is shadow interpreting, where we're literally, typically I think people are accustomed to seeing sign language interpreters doing what we call proscenium work or platform work. So the interpreters are stationary in one setting and the action is happening on the stage in another setting, and the audience is watching from the interpretation over to the play. So shadow interpreting is something we don't often get to do, but we do in the Philadelphia area from time to time, where the interpreters are actually woven into the movement of the actors on the stage. And so there isn't any ping pong effect. It's all happening in the same space. And when we have had the rare opportunity to do that type of work, the response from the deaf community is overwhelming. It's tremendous. It really, the representation of their language on this playing space is a very different experience than seeing it in a separate space, which is also, I want to say, excellent accommodation and totally works. It's not something that shouldn't be done, but it's a unique and special experience. But the thing that has really surprised me is the reaction of the hearing audience when we are in the playing space. I think there's often been a lot of concern that it would be distracting and somehow it would take away from the subscription theater goer. And it has absolutely been completely the opposite. It's been an overwhelmingly positive experience from both a hearing audience who doesn't sign at all or no sign language at all, as well as a deaf signing audience. So that was how I just wanted to connect your question before. That's been a really, really positive experience. I'm always interested to hearing people talk about what they get from it. Tana, I know you talked about that too, wanting to put the work in place when you know that they might not have the text in front of them, but just to be really immersed in that experience has been really positive from everybody. And the other thing, your current question on the table about what does it feel like to inhabit it, I feel it physically all the time. Like the language has to come literally through us. And I wonder if people who go through 2 spoken languages have the same kind of experience. For me, it can be a very visceral experience, especially if it's something I don't want to say, or something that's, feels like uncomfortable to say, that it really physically passes through me. And it's something that I've sort of had to work through sometimes as an interpreter. I wonder if people using spoken language have the same kind of experiences at times.
That's so awesome to hear, Donna, the simultaneous interpretation, like really truly including Asl in the experience, the theater experience with the actors on stage, which I haven't thought about in that same way in terms of like Spanish translation, because truthfully, if your show has nothing to do with a Spanish speaking audience and is not telling the story of Central or South American audience, seeing subtitles on the side of the stage or above the stage isn't going to do it for them, to be honest. And so that was just really awesome to hear, Donna, that a true fusion of these languages to really incorporate and add to everyone's experience. And in terms of feeling the language in my body, absolutely. I feel like, especially in Colombia, people talk with facial expressions. So moving your lips one way says so much, an eyebrow going up another way says another thing, where you don't even have to say words. And I don't know for other people who speak are bilingual or trilingual, but people say when I speak English, I'm a different person than when I speak Spanish, because of, I don't know, in Spanish, so much more is brought on, and I feel very more, like a lot more heightened when I speak Spanish. So I truly immerse myself into that language, especially like when I'm with my family or with my friends speaking Spanish. It's all like very, very big, whereas English, I think it's like a little more, this tone is here. And yeah, Lee, if you want to learn a language, go move somewhere. That's the best place, really. Like I learned another language as an adult. A previous relationship was from someone from Kenya, and he spoke Swahili. And when I would visit his friend, like him or his friends and family, they would only speak Swahili. So I was like, man, I gotta learn this language or else I'll be lost. So I did, and every time I spoke it, it sounded, they said it sounded very Spanish, the way I put it, because it just, that was the only way I knew how to like speak this language. And I just always loved hearing how people who spoke Swahili, they said that it was like slapping words together. Like nothing was ever really full. It was just taking a bunch of words to get the meaning and slapping them together, which I thought was such a great way to describe how people spoke a language.
That's so great. It's the rhythms. We respond to the rhythms. I really feel that. I could keep talking about this. We are officially out of time, but I want to thank you all so much for this opportunity to start this conversation. I do feel like I'm trying to get at something, and you all have helped break a lot of that open for me, and I really appreciate that. I want to do all the thank yous. I thank you each individually. I thank the Wilma staff for all their support during all of this. I thank the audience for coming. And I also want to encourage you to come check out Minor Character if you haven't seen it yet. It also sort of breaks you apart in a really interesting way. It breaks me apart anyway, in a beautiful way, and makes me start thinking about language in this, in a way I don't always let myself think about it. We are going to be in the theater until October 24th, but we will be streaming online from October 25th to November 7th. Please visit some websites. We're probably able to drop a few notices in the chat. Rachel is thank you for dropping the event, the Minor Character event in the chat. But also you can go back to our events page on our website and learn more about our panelists. We have some websites listed there. Again, thank you all so much for being here. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening and a wonderful night. And I hope I get a chance to talk to you more about this.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you, Lee.
All of you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Be well. Thank you.